This is the plaintiff, Wayne Vautrin. He says he brought his van to the defendant for repairs, and the guy faked his inspection so it would pass, but by doing so, he could have been killed. He had 3 rotted tires on the car. He paid him for an alignment, which is impossible to do with rotten tires, and he's here suing for a refund of the $690 he wasted paying this guy. This is the defendant, Steve Nicosia. He says the plaintiff brought him this 25-year-old beat-up van and told him to take a look at it for him, but he didn't want to spend a lot of money on it. He replaced 1 rotten tire, did an alignment and an inspection, and it passed. 6 months later, he comes back claiming his other 3 tires were rotted out and demanded a refund. Huh? He did what he was hired to do, was paid, and that's that. He's accused of doing only half the job.
All parties, please raise your right hands.
Welcome back to the People's Court. Next case on the docket, the plaintiff wants a refund from the defendant who did some work on his van. The van passed inspection, but the plaintiff says there are other problems. The defendant says it's a 25-year-old van. The plaintiff should be grateful it passed inspection at all. It's the case of fake it till you make it.
Okay, Mr. Vautrin?
Yes.
All right. You brought your truck to, what is it, a van? You brought your van to the defendant's automotive place in order to get some repairs done. It's a 1995, wow, van. It's older than my oldest child. Okay. And what kind of work did you pay him to do?
Oh, I paid him. The van needed a wipe. The wipers weren't working. It needed a filler tube for the gas tank. And it veered off to the right, and the inspection was overdue.
Okay, and so did he do those things? Did he align it? Did he give it the inspection and pass it? And did he do the other work?
Well, basically, I told him I didn't want to spend a lot of money on a van. I says, if it needs a lot of money, I don't want to have anything done. And so basically, he called me later. That basically.
Did he do those 4 things you mentioned, or 5, whatever it was? Did he do them? Do you have any evidence he didn't do them?
Well, I have a lot of evidence he never did the wheel alignment. Shouldn't have been done.
Why not?
Because the ball joints are bad and the tires were like on the verge of just blowing out.
So you feel like he charged you for a wheel alignment that wasn't going to work?
The wheel alignment shouldn't have been done, Your Honor. And also,
why not?
Because the ball joints were bad on the van.
Right, you're saying that. Do you have anything from another mechanic who says that work should not have been done, or that work wasn't done, or that work wasn't done right?
I can give you a story on it. I brought the van to him, and he said he did the work. And I asked him the second time, "You sure there's nothing else wrong with the van?" He said, "No, everything's good."
Okay,
So
hold on one second. It's a 25-year-old van. I mean, But when did he have the work? Did you do the work on the van?
That would be, I believe, September 9th he came in.
September 9th of 2019?
2019, yes.
Okay. And you are able to drive the van after he...
No.
Why not?
What happened is I drove the van back home. It was still pulling to the right.
Oh, why didn't you drive right back then?
Because I was almost home, and it wasn't that bad. I figured I'd take care of it later.
How are you going to take care of it later? You just paid the guy to take care of it.
Well, I'd bring it back to him and say the van had, but that's not even the main part of it, Your Honor.
Okay, I'll decide what the main part of it is. I'm asking you questions.
Right.
When I don't need you to mansplain.
All right.
I need you to answer.
All right.
When I ask you, that is a relevant factor for me, and I'm going to tell you why. Because if it's true, your first step would be to call him. Did you call him that day? When's the next time you hear from him?
January 6, 2020.
Correct. And we're talking about a 3-month span of time. So if it was pulling immediately, one would think that your first step would be to call him. Why did he not hear from you in 3 months?
Well, it wasn't pulling that bad, Your Honor, and that's not even the main part that was wrong with the van, but...
That's good, because it's a part I'm not even going to consider.
Okay.
Because it doesn't sound plausible, but go ahead.
Well, anyway, basically, we had the van for 3 months, and I went to move it around the yard to start it, and it wouldn't start, so I brought it up to the local gas station, and he held it for a week. Then he calls me on the phone. He says, the brake line just blew in the parking lot. So I says, you got to come and see it.
The brake line what?
The brake line of the van blew in the service station's parking lot. So he basically
Meaning
said,
when he was testing it, or?
The mechanic was...
When he was testing it, it blew in the middle of testing it?
He was moving around to move it to another spot. The brake line blew. So he says, you got to come down and take a look at this. So I came down, take a look at this, and he showed me the brake line was rotted away. All the tires on the van were dry rotted to the point it shouldn't have hole there. He inspected the van. He should have saw the tires were all rotted out. the brake line was rotted out, and then the mechanic took me in front and shows me the ball joints. And he's going up and down with the ball joints on the car. And he says, and the tires on the front were all rotted out. The one tire that was remaining, he put one new tire on the car. And the...
Okay. Here's when you come to court and you file a lawsuit against someone, you're saying they had a legal obligation to do something and they breached it. What was the legal obligation he had to do?
Inspecting the van, and the van should never pass inspection. He had
okay. Now I'm going to need you to prove what you just said. Do you have from, I don't even know how you would when it's 3 months later. Do you, like, for you to be able to say what you're saying, somebody else would have had to have inspected the van right after and said, this can't pass inspection, and say he's a terrible inspector and he did that, you know,
Your
just
Honor.
to be able to have, are you listening?
I'm listening.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay. He did that just to be able to, you know, to snake you out of $690. I would need to see something from another mechanic who's an inspector who would say that. The first mechanic to look at this is 3 months later. 3 months later. So this bought you 3 more months of life for the camp, for whatever this is, the van. So I think that the basis of your lawsuit is, hey, if that guy was a professional, he would have looked at it and said, not worth doing. That's what you're really saying, right? That he should have looked at it and said, this is such a disaster, don't bother to pay me anything, don't fix anything on it. Is that it?
I told him again, Your Honor, I told him, look the van over really good. I want to put a lot of money into the van.
I know. You're the guy who doesn't want to put a lot of money.
Right.
We've established that. Did you tell him nothing else is wrong with your 25-year-old van?
I did not.
Right, because something else went wrong 3 months later, okay? So how is that his fault?
No, that was a pre-existing condition. When he inspected the van, he should have saw the brake lines were rotted, and he should have saw the tires were bad. I should have been informed of that.
Did you tell him anything about his tires? Did you tell him anything about his brake line? Did you tell him anything about any of the other stuff he's complaining about?
Welcome back to the People's Court. The plaintiff is saying that he took his van to the defendant, and even though it passed inspection, there were all sorts of other problems that the defendant did not address. Did the defendant do what he was supposed to do to pass the inspection, or should he have notified the plaintiff of the other problems? Let's go back into the courtroom.
The brake lines did have some rot, but by DMV's, New York State DMV's rules, if they're not actively leaking, it passes inspection.
Okay.
He needed one tire to pass inspection. The other tires were not in great shape, but you need at least 1 tear, 1 inch tear of dry rot to be able to reject it.
Right.
Only one was that bad.
And that
So I
means
would've
what?
loved
You
to
don't
sell him
flunk
4
him for
tires.
1 bad tire?
You could fail him for 1 bad tire, but I sold him 1 tire. I would have loved to sell 3 more.
Okay.
But we did 1 tire to pass the
so
inspection.
you replaced the 1 tire that was in
failed.
question. Okay.
Right. And then, by then that passed. And then I also have another printout from New York State DMV that ball joints are not part of inspection.
We're done. My verdict in this case is for the defendant. You are basically like anybody else who has a 25-year-old car. You do some work, and then later on it turns out that you were throwing good money after bad, maybe because the car's now 25 years old. Now it needs a bunch of other work, and you are literally reaching back into history to tell a guy who fixed your van 3 months ago that, hey, you know what? On second thought, I probably shouldn't have done that. Give me back my money. No.
Can I show you the pictures of the tires, Your
No, you
Honor?
So the plaintiff fails to prove his case. That didn't go too well for you, Mr. Veteran, did it?
Well, I feel sorry for the next person that he inspects the van.
Do you think when you told him you didn't want to spend a lot of money that he got the impression you didn't want to spend anything that was unnecessary?
Well, I should have been told about the rotted brake lines, and the tires were all bad. You can't pass an inspection on tires that are bad.
Well, according to him, the other 3 were not that bad.
I got pictures that they were.
Well,
Yeah.
all right. Sorry about that. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very
all right.
much.
You must sign some documents on your way out of the courtroom. Mr. Nicosia, you feel okay about this?
I do.
I mean, do you get charged like this often?
No, not often. Usually they don't complain when they pass their inspection.
And do you think you did the proper job, though, for him?
Absolutely. I followed a letter of New York State law.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're off the hook. Harvey?
Got to say, Doug, that it is really hard to prove who did what to a 25-year-old van. It is unclear, and that's why it's so hard to win a case like this.